A husband and 2 kids, a house with dogs, a private business, fame, and success. She had it all. Dr. Sievers, née Teresa Ann Grace, was no ordinary woman with a smile worthy of a magazine cover. A renowned physician, she made a name for herself in the field of alternative or, to be precise, holistic medicine. To many of her patients, she was a guru. Some may say Teresa's life was too good to last long. Dr. Sievers must have had enemies among big pharma executives, and ordinary greedy people must have been jealous of her wealth. So who was the one to reduce this thriving, prosperous woman to dust? The killer's true identity, as well as their motives, would become one hell of a shock. In 2015, Teresa was 46 and a paragon of a self-made woman. She was not your average physician, but a true icon for the proponents of alternative medicine. "I am passionate about empowering you to tap into the doctor within you," she'd tell her patients repeatedly. And the patients, in return, heaped praise on their doctor. Here are the words of merely one of them. "She was a tiny thing like you, and just as cute as a bug's ear. Uplifting, positive, full of energy. A dynamo in a tiny package." Though Dr. Sievers' healing practices are considered non-traditional, initially she earned a master's degree in biology, and then graduated with honors from Ross University School of Medicine. Later, she completed several courses in alternative medicine. Recounting all her titles would make a good half of our story. Having settled down in Bonita Springs in 2006, she opened her practice, Restorative Health and Healing Center, in the Estero Medical Center, and she was on staff at Naples Community Hospital. Moreover, she was a top-notch public speaker. Apart from that, Dr. Sievers was known and loved for her social and voluntary work. For example, she taught teenage moms in our mother's home of Southwest Florida and was involved with different charitable organizations. Too perfect? You bet. But wait, that's not all of it. The respected doctor was sometimes seen with a joint. She swore like a sailor and considered monogamy a relic of the past. Her sister, Annie Lisa, would later recall that Teresa was a walking paradox. She was this incredibly gifted, brilliant doctor, and this incredibly Christ-like person. She just lived that way. She'd give you the shirt off her back. She'd help strangers. She'd get up at 2 a.m, but yet she'd put on her 5-inch heels and curl her hair, and she'd be swearing like a sailor and drinking. Her family life was just as eventful. However, there was a dark side to it. By the time our story took place, Teresa had been married for 12 years. The couple had 2 daughters, 8 and 11 years old. But who was the lucky guy that lived his life with such a woman? This is Mark Sievers from Missouri. Before the marriage, he worked as a licensed nurse, and in Bonita Springs, the man became the office manager at his wife's holistic medical practice. While Teresa earned their living, Mark managed their finances from home. Mr. Sievers treated his wife as the greatest gift in life, and he worried about her a lot. So then the husband adores her. Anyone could see that. He texts her 24/7. Not a day, not a moment goes by without Mark messaging Teresa about how much he loves her, as if they are newlyweds and not a married couple of 12 years. There are hundreds of pages of these messages. While investigating Teresa's murder, the detectives would read them all, and they would learn that Mark's tenacious passion was far from mutual. Teresa had lovers, although her husband did too. The summer of 2015, it was an ordinary family vacation. The Sievers went to upstate New York to visit Teresa's mother on her birthday. Teresa, Mark, and their daughters seemed to enjoy their time together. The smiles, the jokes, the family pictures. Teresa decided to come home earlier. Work was her #1 priority. What fun can you have if you've got patients to attend to? Mark took his wife to the airport and said his warm goodbyes. On Sunday, at about 11 p.m., they exchanged text messages. Teresa told her husband she had landed, bought some food, and was on her way home. But the patients never saw their doctor, either the next morning or ever again. After hearing from the nurse about his wife's absence, Mark started calling their friends. What could have happened to this woman who was so eager to get back to work? Why didn't she make it there? At last, Mark got through to their neighbor and asked him to check out the house. The man went there with Mr. Sievers still on the line. "I have to call 911, he said to Mark, and heard a prompt response. "Do it."
911, what is your emergency?
I'm at a friend's house. He's out of town, and I came here to check on his wife, and she's dead on the floor.
Is she awake?
No, she's dead on the floor. She's cold. The back of her head is bashed in, and there's blood everywhere. Yeah, half the blood is dry, half is wet, and she's cold. She's dead cold.
During his first interrogation, Mark was absolutely heartbroken. Take a look for yourselves. It seems that even the detective, who's supposed to be cold and detached, sympathizes with the widower.
And at the airport, we pulled into the parking, ultimately at the parking. We went into the airport because there was like a food court. We thought, hey, great, we'll eat together. There was no food court. So we ended up saying our goodbyes when we said our goodbyes. I took a picture of her saying goodbye, and we left. And she said to me, don't blow up my fucking cell phone with text messages now.
Willingly, Mark gave his phone to the police. Download anything you want, but find the killer. And the investigators did just that. Among the data found on Mark's cell phone, there were diary entries where he, in detail, described his life with Teresa and his growing frustration. The man did worry a lot. Their relationship was almost like an axis around which his life revolved, and Teresa had other things on her mind. While she was preoccupied with the healing practice, Mark constantly bombarded her with messages demanding intimacy. Once, Mark suggested a rendezvous at work. "I want to take care of you," he said. She did not write back. "I guess your lack of response is an answer in and of itself," he said. "Mark, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of doing things," she responded. Later, Mark made a journal entry saying things were getting better between him and his wife. "Teresa and I are in a good place. She's been kissing me unsolicited for the past couple of days." It was written on June 24, not long before the murder. The reality was that after their 12 years of marriage, Mr. and Mrs. Sievers were practically fed up with each other. They experimented with other partners and engaged in swinging. At least, that's what the friends of the family told the investigators. So, maybe, one of those partners got jealous and committed the crime. The police came to a dead end. The investigators fixed their attention on the Sievers staff. That's when the name of Sandra Hoskins, the doctor's assistant, came up. She was the one who waited for Teresa at the clinic that unfortunate morning, the one who reported her absence. Sandra had been working for Teresa for 8 years, and her husband, Frank, as well. Mark Sievers fired him 9 months before the murder, and so Frank was interrogated too.
Dr. Sievers ever come on to you in any sexually or connotative way? No. Anything like that?
No.
Never had a relationship with her outside of work or anything like that?
As for Sandra and Teresa, well, sparks were sometimes flying. Teresa's sister mentioned it to the police that lately Teresa simply couldn't stand Sandra.
But over the years, last couple years, she would say to me, "Sandra's driving me out of my, I'm going to censor everything because my sister was great for F-bombs, drive me out of my freaking mind." I also heard her say over the years that, Sandra was bad-mouthing Teresa.
However, the conversations with Frank and Sandra led to nothing. Could it be a burglary then? But a large gun collection and $40,000 stored inside a safe in the Sievers home were left untouched. Burglary was out of the question then. As for the general public, people started talking about big pharmaceutical companies. The thing is, Teresa was not the only holistic doctor to die that year. The Americans extensively discussed a whole series of such deaths. Some doctors committed suicide, the others perished in car wrecks, and 4 healers were actually killed. Theories began to circulate that this was the way Big Pharma got rid of the competition. Holistic doctors discouraged their patients from buying pills, which was potentially harmful to pharmacological business. Still, there was no real evidence to back up the theories. Friends, family, patients, hundreds of people all in all showed up at Teresa's funeral. Who could have wished for the death of this wonderful doctor, mother, wife, and benefactress? Who could have committed such a hideous crime? These questions tormented the mourning crowd, but only 2 men knew the answer. While family and friends bid their last goodbye to Dr. Sievers, the investigators searched the house and gathered information from all sources possible. One such source was Bonnie, Mark's mother, who came to feed the pets while the Sievers were on vacation in New York. She was the last person to visit the house before the murder. That day, she had trouble setting the alarm, so she called Mark. He told her not to worry because Teresa was coming home soon anyway. Bonnie left without fixing the alarm. "This is a case in which 21st century technology became vital," said prosecutor Cynthia Ross. The investigators did indeed make use of modern technology. Mark could never imagine the things that the apt investigators would find in his cell phone. For instance, almost daily he talked to his childhood friend, Curtis, from Missouri. The two men often called each other brother from another mother. Turns out, these words were not just a pretty metaphor, but a secret code. The investigators concluded that upon hearing or reading the code phrase, or simply the word other, the friends actually switched to other devices. Both Mark and Curtis had burner phones that were used for lengthy and straightforward conversations. The friends would keep in touch every day, but then, on June 25th, their communication stopped. The last message came from Mark. "No need to call me. Hope you're having a nice day." But are these phone talks and messages somehow connected with the murder? The two of them could simply brag about swinging or share their macho secrets, couldn't they? Maybe Mark was just complaining to Curtis about the lack of attention from his wife. We can only guess, because about a week after Teresa's murder, Mr. Sievers hired a lawyer and refused to participate in the investigation any further. But help came soon enough. The detectives got a call from a man in far-off Illinois, and the man said he heard about one Curtis Wright and his suspicious trip to Florida on the weekend of the murder. The investigators picked up the trail. Now, they were twice as interested in Curtis. They went to Missouri, paid a visit to their brand new suspect, and checked his phone. Then, in long and numerous conversations with Curtis's acquaintances, the puzzle pieces started coming together one by one. Turns out, almost half the town knew about Wright's little trip. The wife confirmed her husband's absence that weekend and said he rented a car. The pharmacist came up to the police and told them that Curtis turned up at his house in a rented Hyundai and asked for some pills to keep him awake through the night. Wright's employer also said that Curtis was out of town. The only people unaware seemed to be Wright's friends, Jimmy Rogers, aka Hammer, and his girlfriend, Taylor Showmaker. Meanwhile, the investigators set out to find the rental car and soon discovered it in Arizona. All the routes on the GPS device were erased. It took some time, but the forensic team managed to recover the data. And once recovered, the routes facilitated the investigation. It was proved that the car traveled from Missouri to Florida, with the Sievers address as the destination point. Okay, now, Curtis went to Florida, that's for sure, but he was not alone. The GPS was registered to another man's email, that of the unaware Jimmy Rogers, also known as Hammer. A white cooler with a cardboard box inside containing blue latex gloves, one ball-peen hammer, and black shoes, as well as a black backpack with a navy jumpsuit inside. These were the things that Taylor Showmaker saw inside her boyfriend's suitcases when he was unpacking after the trip. At the time, Jimmy told his pregnant girlfriend that he'd gone to Florida on business. It was a 3-day trip. He even brought her souvenirs, a Fort Myers Beach t-shirt, and a memorabilia plaque that read, "Don't mind the mess, my kids are making memories." But after Curtis called and told him about the cops, Jimmy lost his cool. First, he took Taylor's Fort Myers Beach shirt and the black shoes and threw them in the community dumpster. And later, after the investigators came to his own house, Jimmy Rogers freaked out for real. He started to panic. That very day, he told Showmaker to get in the car and drive off in a hurry. They went to Rogers' workplace, where he took his phone out, put it under a water fountain, and crushed it to pieces. Then, he remembered he had forgotten the jumpsuit and the gloves, and the couple went back home to get them. While in the car again, Rogers told his girlfriend to throw the phone, or what was left of it, out of the window. The blue jumpsuit and the gloves came next. Showmaker was told to dispose of them in the same manner. Later that night, the woman asked Jimmy some very straightforward questions. She got some very straightforward answers. And she got very, very scared.
And then I asked him what he went down there for, and he said to make money. And then asked him how does he make money, and it was murdering Mark's wife.
And did you say how he murdered her?
Was it hammered?
According to Taylor, Curtis hired Jimmy to help him kill Teresa Sievers for $10,000. The men were also captured on a surveillance video at Walmart, buying trash bags, wet wipes, and other suspicious things. At the end of August, both Curtis and Jimmy were arrested. There was enough evidence to charge them with murder. But what about the motive? Why would Curtis kill his friend's wife? Remember how the alarm in the Sievers' house was off? The two killers tampered with it beforehand. But the investigators were also very curious as to why Mark Sievers told his mum to leave it as it was. Why didn't he ask the helping neighbor what exactly happened to his wife? The investigation team meticulously gathered their evidence, and, at long last, the puppet master was also handcuffed. It was Mark Sievers. He was the one to orchestrate Teresa's murder, the man who, just a few months ago, was clasping hands with his daughter at their mother's funeral, the man who sent tons of love letters to his wife, though lately he seemed to be struggling with depression. The one to finally unmask Mark was his longtime friend, Curtis Wright. He got married just a couple of months before the murder, and it was at the wedding that Mark, his best man, revealed his dreadful plan. He told Curtis that his own marriage was on the rocks, that his wife was going to take their daughters away, and that he couldn't afford to fight for custody. That he had no other way but to kill Teresa. Mark Sievers was very generous with his offer, about $100,000 to do this thing. But where would the money come from? Turns out, Mark cherished Teresa so much he had 5 life insurance policies, worth a total of $4.4 million in his wife's name. But why would Mark enforce such drastic measures? Was it his depression? He demanded more and more from his wife, and he was never satisfied. Not even the swinging experiments could fill the void. All his pleas for intimacy, all the never-ending messages, it was as if they disappeared into a black hole. At least, so it may seem to a man suffering from depression. Mark felt unimportant and ignored while Teresa was in the limelight, being the sole breadwinner in her family. She loved her high-heeled shoes and always had, as Mark himself pointed out, a perfect makeup. This contrast would erode his soul and grow like a tectonic fracture, and his depression would only amplify these emotions. But is it even possible that a mental state like this can cause a person to commit such a crime? People with clinical depression are 3 times more likely to commit crimes than the general population. This statement is based on the study conducted by Oxford University's psychiatry department. However, the scientists also emphasize that the overwhelming majority of depressed people are neither violent nor criminal and should not be stigmatized. The relationship between mental illness and violent crimes is often exaggerated, said Crystal Dielman, who is an occupational therapist and assistant professor at Dalhousie University, as well as an expert in mental health and criminal justice.
However, mental illness is not a good predictor of violence. And in fact, people who have mental illnesses are quite vulnerable and are much more likely to be victims of violence than they are to be violent themselves.
That being said, Mark's actions cannot be justified by his mental state or anything else for that matter. All the evidence was against him. In December 2019, a Lee County jury convicted Mr. Sievers of the first-degree murder of his wife. Jimmy Rogers and Curtis Wright were found guilty of second-degree murder. Apparently, they both hit the victim with the hammer. First Curtis, then Jimmy. Besides, these 2 men first met in a jail cell, though their previous crimes were not that brutal. Jimmy was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm, while Curtis was incarcerated after the police found a meth lab in his house. As for Mark, his record was clean. You can live with someone for many years, share a flat, an office, have kids with them, and still know nothing of the darkest thoughts that cross the mind of your significant other. It seems such things can only happen in elaborate psychological thrillers, but real life is full of plots Hollywood screenwriters can only dream of. The story of Teresa and Mark Sievers is just one of them.